Welcome to Unbiased and On the Fence. I'm Shane. Thank you so much for joining. And we are joined today with my special guest, Julie Barnes, an author, a nurse of over 20 years. Is that right, Julie?
Yes.
So welcome to the show. You've got some books that I want to tell everybody right off the bat that the links are in the description. She is offering the books free this month for you guys. So be sure to take advantage of that special gift from Julie. Thank you so much for doing that for us. And so, yeah, you've been, how long have you been looking forward to this event? Because it's not new news to you, is it? Like it is so many other people.
I actually first heard about it, or learned about it rather, in 2006 when some information came through to me. And since then, I've been, as everyone else, waited for 2012 to come and go, and wonder what was going on. And some of the things we were speaking about before we went live, Shane, I know you mentioned the Mandela effect, and you've been really researching it. I felt that there was almost a shift in the timeline in 2011. There was some really bizarre things going on in my world. I don't know about everybody else, but it was almost as if, as we were getting closer to 2012, there was a lot of interference, if you will. Did you happen to notice anything unusual?
At the time I was in college and I was like working full time, and I was so much into 3D at the time. I mean, I was like in my spare time, I would look into Planet Nibiru coming or Planet X or whatever, but I was totally not spiritual at all at that point in my life. So, I mean, I did look a little bit into it, but like a lot of people saw 2012 come and go, and I was sort of, half paying attention to it at the time. So.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely noticed some bizarre things and kind of some intensity in the third dimensional living. I guess that's the best way I'll put it. There were a lot of things that came out of left field, so to speak, in my life.
Were they personal or for everyone?
Well, they were personal and for the people that I was friends and family with and still am. But yeah, it was a different time. And since then, I feel like there's been a lot of clearing, particularly in the last couple years and the last year especially. Have you noticed kind of a lightening?
Yes, I have noticed some differences, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Things completely feel different to me. And I mean, it's not just the Mandela effect and becoming more spiritual. I don't think it is anyway. But yeah, things just, and I noticed even before, the Mandela effect sort of jarred me back into, pulled me out of the grind of life. I was noticing the clouds in the sky and the sun, everything changing. I couldn't figure out why people weren't noticing the sun wasn't the yellow sun we used to have. And it was just strange that even while I was sort of asleep still to the spiritual part of life or whatever, I still would see other people were even more asleep than I was at the time when I was not even quite awake yet. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know what you mean about the sunshine. I certainly remember when I was a child, and I'll just put it out there. I was a child of the 60s. I was alive when Kennedy was president. So that kind of lets you know the era I'm from.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been around a while. Mind you, I was just a baby when Kennedy was president. But yeah, I've seen a lot of different comings and goings in my day, especially before the advent of this mass communication that we have now.
Yes, it is great that we can connect like this and meet so many other people, especially when people in our life think, we're kind of out there in left field. Is it like that for you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there are only mainly my friends, if I were to share a lot of this with some of my extended family, and I have, and I kind of get blank stares. So, and that's okay. Everybody has their own path, you know?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it's really about having respect for other people as they go along their path and just following yours and exemplifying what you believe in yourself, and
Yeah,
without having to preach to others. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's sort of the problem I see, is that there's a lot of preaching, like I know better than you, and I'm on the only path to take, and sort of it's like, how can you be so sure of that? Sure enough that that's sort of what led me on my search for truth, is that I was in the Christian religion, and we were told to go out and spread the gospel, the good news, and I didn't feel comfortable doing that until I was really well versed on it and understood it really well. And so I dove in deep to learn everything I could about it before I go out, so I would be able to answer those tough questions. And that's what led me where I am now. It's like it led me away from sharing, what I see as bad news now, that we're all damned to hell or whatever. I mean, it's not even really good news once you really think of it that way.
I know what you mean. Anything that instills fear in a person. I mean, fear is just so detrimental to the body. And I know as a nurse, that's why I ended up studying hypnosis, because I wanted to find the key to well-being. One key that might unlock the way for others to experience full healing. And so I kind of branched off into some metaphysical things through the course of my 20 plus years of being a nurse. And so I know that anything that instills fear in a person, and especially guilt, every other negative emotion is really a derivation of fear, some level of fear, you know, and really, and any kind of spiritual message should instill love and peace and harmony. And anyway, we could carry on about that.
Yeah,
As
because
far
really
as
worry is horrible for your health, isn't it? To sit there and resonate and worry and fear and even anger. I mean, that's like they say a lot of cancers and stuff come from, just unforgiveness and just letting it sit there and brew inside of you. And it's just not helpful at all to sit in those sort of vibrations all the time. And we're learning so much more about that now,
yeah, you're absolutely right. And I've seen direct evidence in a lot of the patients I've cared for, and family members experiencing some disease processes. And I would say the root core of most of it comes from the emotional realm, if you could call it a realm. But we're such creative beings. We're so potent. Every thought and every emotion that we have is literally creating things, and especially for ourselves and our future trajectory. So, that's the thing that I've tried to do with these books, and the way the books came about is a little unusual. I just didn't sit down and go, well, let me make an outline and let me figure out what kind of book I want to write. And that's why I wanted to come on your show, is I've got some kind of interesting information that I think will inspire love and peace when people hear this story.
I think when I was hearing about how your first book came about, and you wrote it in like 11 days or something, it sort of just, you like intuited it, right? It sort of just came to you, or
Yes.
okay, because that's
Yes.
how a lot of my investigatory times have been. When I'm like really looking in, I'll just get like people call it a download, I guess that's a good term for it, because you just get this rush of information and things begin to click and make sense to you. And to anybody else, I guess you could think of it like, wow, I just had an epiphany and I just realized all this stuff. But I just know I'm not that bright. And I'm sure it was like that. You were writing this stuff and it's like, this is not coming from me. It's like, because you wrote it verbatim and it didn't take any editing or anything like that, right?
Right. The actual parts that I would consider the quote unquote spiritual teachings that are in the book, All Flavors, those were verbatim. The other part that kind of the storyline part that is based on my life, and there's some true story in there, I would go back and edit some of the wording of the sentences. I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to writing. I studied journalism in college, but then went on to be a nurse. So um, All Flavors is my second book. The first one I wrote in 1999. And in 2006, all flavors, I guess I'll just say it came through in 11 days. And that's who the Little Prince is behind, I think, some of the inspiration for the book. And that's what I like to.
Was From the Depths. From the
Yeah,
Depths.
From the Depths. And that's on my website too, jbarnesauthor.com. From the Depths, yes, that was 1999. And that's a long novel. My trilogy is actually the Foundation Books trilogy is what I call it. And again, Foundation Books kind of refers to some rudimentary information. And I would put my work in the category of spiritual fiction. And what I think is nice for people at such a time is everyone's looking for entertainment and information. And if it can be combined, I think that's kind of a perk. If you can read a story and enjoy the storyline, but all the while during the reading of it, you're actually gleaning some spiritual tidbits that might help you expand. I think that's a pretty good combination. So that's what I've done with this trilogy.
That's really nice. And you're actually working on Creation Song, which is the third of the trilogy, right?
Yes, and this, the thing about Creation Song, I had been working on what I thought was the completion of the trilogy. It was another story, which I guess will be on its own. I will continue with that. But when I kept sitting down to write it, I had this feeling, this sense that I needed to write something else. So one day I sat down and I said, all right. And I prayed and I said, I'd like some guidance, especially with what's going on right now. This was just in February this year when I sat down and I thought, wow, this event's coming. And I had watched Allison Coe's videos, and she's wonderful. And some of Alba Weinman's videos as well. If you checked any of those out, those are amazing. And so I thought, well, what's going on? I'd really like to get some more information. And so I sat down, and Creation Song basically came through in a week, not the whole thing, the beginning part. And I have a preview of that on my website as well. I shared that with my kids, and they read it and called me up and said, wow, this is a lot different than what you usually write, because it's kind of like quantum physics mixed into it.
Oh, okay. I love that.
Yeah, I was asking for some answers, and I love science and researching things, but I was kind of amazed with what came through. So again, everything's free. The books are free this month, and when I'm still working on getting them into hard copy form. But in the meantime, they're hosted on Smashwords.com, which if you go onto that site from my website, you click on one of my books, it will take you to the page there. And without even having to register for having a free account on Smashwords, you can just click on Online Reader and go ahead and read the whole book. So I've tried to make it as streamlined as possible to get the information out.
And I did add that in the description below for anybody that's wanting to go. There's the link there, and it also explains how you can click on Online Reader and just read it directly on the website instead of having to fill out because it's going to look like you need to fill out, create an account. But if you just click Online Reader, you can begin reading it right away. And so, yeah, I did add those directions beneath. So if you guys forget, you can go down there and read them. So you're familiar with the whole QHHT thing then. So how does what the hypnosis you've done compare with the QHHT? I mean, is it the same thing, or are you in a different, is it regression, or what's your hypnosis or hypnotherapist therapy?
Well, it's similar. There's actually the people who trained me. I was trained by Gerald Kine. He is no longer here on the planet right now in bodily form, but he was quite a master. He was someone who started something called Ultra Height, which would be comparable to QHHT. It's just another label for accessing that higher part of yourself. And then I also trained with Cal Banyan out in California. But when I mainly, there are ways you can even go between lives and you can regress to past lives. But I mainly, as a nurse, went at it to help people do more clinical kind of stress relief, stop smoking, weight loss, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. That's probably a pretty nice. That's when I looked into it, that was like a lot of hypnotherapists in my area would focus on the weight and smoking and things like that. So that's probably some pretty hot topics for hypnotherapists, right?
It is, and that's a lot of back in 2007 when I first started training, the instructor, especially Gerald Kiney, said, well, I'm going to let you know, while we're training, some of you may go at this very clinically and just focus on weight loss and smoking. But some of you, when you're aggressing people to try to get to a core issue, the source of some problems or addictions, you're going to end up going into past lives. So I want to let you know that is going to happen, as well as going in between lives and accessing the higher self. So anyone who's been in hypnosis or is a hypnotist has certainly come across it.
Yeah, I remember Dolores Cannon talking about how she sort of stumbled upon it by accident way back, I guess it was the 60s or something. And somebody started talking about these past lives, and it was sort of, it intrigued them. Of course, that would be so cool for something like that to happen. So are you still doing hypnotherapy now?
Not as a work effort. It's just for family and friends at this time. I'm focusing on writing at this time, and I still do a little nursing on the side. So I just love working with people and trying to not make them, but assist them to live a better life, whatever way it might be it physical, emotional, mental. So that's really been my life focus.
In your practice with hypnotherapy, were you finding yourself coming across what they call volunteers, as the three waves of volunteers? Did you come across any light workers, or that type of instead of going to a past life, they went somewhere else, or there was a light or whatever?
There were a couple of those. And I didn't have my office very long. I had it for a year, so I didn't have the years of experience like Dolores Cannon and Allison Coe, Alba Weinman, but they definitely they have quite a good practice. I know Dolores isn't here anymore, unfortunately, but I know she's still assisting people. So
Yeah, she's actually been doing more since she passed away, I think, than before. She's not sort of confined to our laws of physics.
isn't that true? And that's similar to The Little Prince. And I know you're familiar with the book The Little Prince that was published in 1946.
Yeah, from your research of it when you talked about it, I forgot what I read of yours, but
Okay. They actually just did a movie. I think it was maybe in 2008, and I don't know what studio did it, but there's a children's movie, The Little Prince, as well. So that's kind of a cool film to watch. They do a little takeoff at the end, and it has a girl instead of The Little Prince, but it's a cute show. But yeah, that book, the original book called The Little Prince, published in 1946, it's been referred to as an allegory of the Christ child's return to Earth. I'm not sure if you were aware of that. And
just
at
from
the
your
end of
research.
yeah, at the end of that story, the little prince allows a venomous snake in the desert to bite him so he can physically die to return home.
Mm-hmm.
And the narrator, the grieving narrator in the story, appeals to readers at the end of the book to look for the return of the little prince in the stars. And this kind of, I'm starting to go into my story about the little prince here, if you don't mind.
No, please do.
Okay. Well, just maybe if I can just kind of go over a bit of this so the listeners will understand who this little prince might be.
And what the books are about as well, right? Or at
Yeah,
least
yeah.
the one with the ice cream cone. What's it called again? Sorry.
Yes, all flavors.
All flavors, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm certain that he was behind that. And I also, on my channel, Return of the Little Prince, there's a video of John Holland. He's a medium. You probably know him. He's affiliated with Hay House.
Yes, I've seen him before. I saw him in the video you posted, but I'd seen him before. He looked really familiar, so I don't remember
Yeah.
where, but I've definitely seen him around.
Yeah, he's pretty well known. And so maybe I could just cover a couple paragraphs of some background so I can catch people up with what I'm about to say, which might seem a bit outlandish till you hear some of this background.
I
If
think
I
that
might.
would be a good idea, and especially with you're saying this new cartoons coming out. I don't think it's a coincidence. You know, I don't believe in coincidences, so I think this
Yeah,
is all tied together.
I think so too. I think so too, because this is really about, the power of love moving beyond space and time to come to 3D and give information. So just a little bit of the background. Um, exactly 11 weeks before the World Trade Center tragedy on 9/11, 2001, a little boy was born in June during the week of the total solar eclipse that occurred on the summer solstice. And his mother came from a Christian background. His father was from a Jewish family, and they were married on 11/11. And when I met him in 2002, I immediately knew something was unusual about him. And as a pediatric nurse and a former nanny, I'd encountered many children, and they all had their own pure special light. But this little boy, he had something unique. His serenity was very unusual in a child so young, and he exuded this grounded, loving energy that was extraordinary for a 14-month-old. He seemed to kind of be focused outward rather than on his own needs. And his mother, Karen, is my best friend from childhood, so that's my link with him. Um, and when Karen was pregnant with him, she flew from California, where she lives, to visit me in Florida. She was 6 months pregnant. She brought her 2-year-old daughter. And a few weeks later, after their visit, I had a nightmare, and it woke me up. It was about a car accident that took her new baby's life and put hers in peril. And I was trying to save them in my dream. I woke up screaming and crying. I was just shocked, and I couldn't sleep. So a little later that day, I called her, and I just gently reminded her to be extra careful around cars, especially while she was driving. And she assured me she would. And every time we spoke, I made certain it wasn't while she was driving. And I don't want to carry you. Feel free to jump in anytime, Shane.
Oh no, you're doing great.
Okay. Well, his name's Brody, and Brody's babysitter was a devout Christian woman who knew him from infancy. And she said that she sometimes had to look away from his gaze because she was so humbled by the light of love that emanated from him. And this babysitter also said she believed that Karen was aware that she had little time left with Brody prior to the accident. The day before they left to travel to Phoenix to visit Karen's mother, the sitter was at her house, and Brody was napping in the afternoon. And even though Karen had to prepare for the trip and run errands, she woke up Brody from his nap to take him with her. And she'd never done this before, and the sitter tried to convince her to let him rest up before the long trip. But Karen was adamant that he come with her, so she scooped him up and spent the busy day with him. And then that evening, Karen woke up from an agitated sleep and went into his bedroom where 16-month-old Brody was asleep. And she was watching him sleeping and sat down next to him and felt this strong desire to be next to him. So she picked him up and felt this overwhelming love and this feeling that she needed to safeguard him. And she prayed that he would always be with her and to never be taken from her. And she was really tearful. She related this to me. She felt this urgency, and she appealed to God for his safety. So subsequently, they left for Phoenix the next morning, and Karen's husband's a doctor, and he was going to attend a conference in Phoenix while Karen spent time with her mother and her 2 young children. And 2 days later, Brody was injured when his grandmother backed over him in her driveway while Karen tried to pull him to safety. And Karen called me on the way back to her mother's house after Brody had passed on at the hospital. She wanted me to be with her, so I flew to Phoenix. And I continued with them on a flight to California, where I assisted the family during their funeral arrangements. So that was pretty heavy, and nothing can be more difficult than losing a child. And
Yeah, I
spoke
can't
to.
even imagine. Even for
No,
you
I
being so
know.
close to your best friend that you'd grown up with. Oh wow, it's I don't wish that on anybody, and but you know what? It's amazing how when something so traumatic happens like that, that something so good can come from it, because you can't imagine anything could possibly come from something that's so life changing, and awful. But there was a deeper meaning. And from our perspective, sometimes we can't see that deeper meaning or understand how it could have a bigger meaning in the overall picture of things because we're so limited here on earth. But there was a deeper meaning, and that's sort of what led you down this road you've been on for 18 years, right? 17 years.
Yes. Yes, ever since then, I've been on this mission to reassure my best friend, who's really like a sister to me, that Brody still existed after his passing. And because I'm pretty persistent when I set out for something, I was determined. So, but he actually first came through to my daughter when she was 11 with a message for his mother. My daughter woke up one night and ran into my bedroom, and she was crying and really upset, and she could barely talk. The next morning, I came to learn that during a dream that woke her up, there were numerous people reaching out to her with a strong desire for her to deliver messages to their loved ones. And her deceased grandmother, my mother, appeared. And she kept the other people kind of subdued and reassured my daughter with her familiarity. And she cleared the way for Brody to come through. And Brody told my daughter that he was alive and doing very well, and that he wished for her to deliver a message to his mother for him. He said that he wanted her to know that he still existed and that life continued after death. And he said to tell his mother that he loved her and wished for her to find peace and that the accident was not her fault and she would get to see him again one day. So interestingly enough, I called Karen that morning and I adjusted for the 3-hour time difference. And when I told her what transpired and I gave her the message from Brody, she dropped the phone. She finally picked it up and told me that when she awoke that morning for the very first time since his passing, she had appealed directly to him and asked him to give her a sign that he was okay, that he still existed. And an hour later was when my call came for her.
Wow.
Yeah. So that I still wanted more from my friend. So that in 2006 is when I took 2 weeks off work for my daughter's tonsillectomy. And I wanted to write something for Karen that would maybe ease her sorrow, hoping for a message from Brody. So I kind of went into a state of prayer and was fiddling around on my keyboard. And that's when All Flavors came through in 11 days. It's a short novel, and it came through one paragraph at a time. There was no outline, there was nothing. I consider it divine inspiration that fueled it into being. And I recognized when I was writing it that it was way beyond my solo creation, and there were so many unusual events that occurred while I was writing it, as well as this energy I still haven't experienced since that time. It was literally bliss. I was filled with pure love, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I didn't need much sleep. All I wanted to do was write, and the words and phrasing of the story were just literally flowing without effort as it came to me. So that was really cool, and my friend really liked the book. But I still wanted more for my friend. So I took another step, and I went to a Hay House event in Orlando just a few months later, after June of writing All Flavors. It was in October of 2006. And this video is on my channel as well, that other people can hear this. This was still during the time I was completing the publication on the book, where I went to see John Holland, and the audience was over 500 people. And John made it clear he didn't take requests from the audience, that the loved ones guided him to find the audience member for whom they had a message. So when he finished his intro speech, he was ready to allow the first loved one to deliver their message. And Brody immediately came through with a message for Karen, assisted by my grandmother who had just passed away the prior year. And both of them are pivotal characters in All Flavors. There was
I think
no
it's
doubt about it.
interesting that also with your daughter, it's like your grandma was assisting him then too. So yeah, it was so touching to see this video. So I recommend everybody go watch this video with John Holland. And it seemed like he was just starting the thing, and that was you were the first person he sensed over that direction, and he sensed your grandma, and then Brody, and then that made the connection with the Little Prince. So I'll let you carry on, because this was just so amazing to me.
I know, and I'm kind of I don't like the spotlight, and I commend you for doing this show, Shane. I think it's awesome. You're a natural. I'm just not one who likes the limelight. I'd rather be a writer somewhere on the top of a mountain in a little cabin where no one sees me, truly. But I want to share this information because I believe it will assist people, particularly the messages in all flavors for this time right now, while people are a little bit anxious about this shift in the event and wondering what's going on. I recognize now that this all flavors book is literally like a preparation for the event. It really will help people kind of gain control of their emotions and their thoughts while they're being entertained by a story. But anyway, when Brody stated that he's the little prince, in my mind at that time, while I sat in the audience, I had already recognized kind of the divine nature of what was occurring when the words of this book came through to me. So I was flabbergasted. I could barely speak and I couldn't think very straight when I was sitting in the audience. And what was really cool that he also said was that the family's dog that had passed was with him. And I know if anyone's like me who loves their pets, you always wish, oh, I hope I see them again. I'd love it. I'd love to have an eternity with my animal on board as well. And he said that the family's dog that had passed was with him. So that was really neat. And right after I finished All Flavors, and that happened with John Holland, that's when The Great Shift, an article came through me, I guess I'll say, called The Great Shift. And that's when I first got the information about the event, The Great Shift. And I believe it came from Brody as well, The Little Prince. And that is also on my website. Actually, I have another website that's specifically for this Little Prince information. I think I sent that to you. It's secondlight.org.
Yes, I do have that down below as well.
Okay.
Secondlight.org.
Yeah, that's where The Great Shift is. So someone could read that, and it's really soothing. When you read it, you feel kind of triumphant already. Not worrying about the cabal and not worrying about any kind of dark anything. It really lets you know we are victorious. We have already prevailed. We're just walking through linear moments for a little while longer. That's all that's happening. We've already prevailed, and that was made very clear to me.
Yeah, it was for me as well. Just to keep on trucking, not to worry about anything, realize that all the chaos we see is orchestrated, it's all for a reason, and the higher good would be served in the end. And just not to worry about anything, not to have any fear about anything. And I've been totally fearless, and that's part of what you do. You help people become fearless and realize that we have nothing to worry about. Everything is sort of ordained in a way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Shane. Exactly. And being fearless, it feels good. And if you feel like a little nagging doubt, or if you're tired and just you're kind of feeling a little overwhelmed at any time, it's almost like just deep breathing and looking up and just kind of grounding yourself, just doing a little something different. Get out into nature. That'll quickly ground a person. So I know these times are really busy and there's a lot of information out there, but in the end, we've already prevailed. So that's the great news. Have you heard of the harmonic concordance?
I don't think I have.
Okay. Well, just to jump back into the story I was telling, the statement that Brody made about being the little prince, that remained with me. And this term held no meaning for Karen or her family, and they'd never used it regarding Brody. She kind of vaguely remembered the book, The Little Prince, from high school French class. And as I mentioned, that story is often referred to as a Christian allegory. And they say the little prince is symbolic for Jesus, a pure soul who comes to earth. So when the narrator at the end of that story appeals to the readers to watch for the little prince's return and to look to the stars for him, that's on the last page. So I'm very inquisitive and I like to research. So I researched an astrological event called the Harmonic Concordance, which occurred precisely 1 year to the day and hour after Brody's passing. And this celestial event, it was the sign of a star in the sky that made the seal of Solomon, or the Star of David, the Merkaba. And the computer programs determined that this stellar event had only happened once in a 4,000-year time span. So that was really interesting to me. I thought, okay, so here's the little prince a year after his passing to the day and the hour. There's a sign in the heavens that had only occurred once in 4,000 years. And I thought, wow, okay, that's different. And then I found some more information that on that same day of the Harmonic Concordance, there was a bus traveling near Phoenix going on to New Mexico, and it was halted by an incredibly bright light that remained shining down on the road for 10 minutes. And there was a passenger who took a photo of it, and later it revealed a figure of a man within the light who resembled images depicting Christ. And, I wasn't there, I didn't see it, but apparently the Air Force in New Mexico scrambled because it showed up on radar. I don't know. So all of this piqued my interest, but I knew just simply on its own that Brody coming through to my daughter, and then the book coming through, and then John Holland bringing him through. There's still more, though. There's another sign that just happened the week before the solar eclipse last year. My family was actually given a message in physical form. And this is pretty trippy. I mean, I'm not one to come out and say outlandish things because that's just not my nature. I'm not looking for the limelight again. But during that week in August, my children are adults now, and my daughter also believes what I do about Brody because she was the first one to receive the info from him. And she still recalls the potency of that occurrence. So that week in August last year, I finally shared everything about Brody with my 20-year-old son as we walked our dog in a local park. And that evening at twilight, my son stepped outside to bring in our cat, and something caught his eye. On the step that was leading into our house, he saw this small brown leaf, a little dry brown leaf about an inch long. And he noticed a symbol on the leaf, so he picked it up to examine it. On both sides of this leaf was a perfect six-pointed star, and the dark lines looked like they were burned into the leaf. They were thick. The thick lines of the star, they're straight, and they form a precise geometrical shape. My son, he showed it to me and asked if it was the shape of the star I was referring to regarding the harmonic concordance. And yes, indeed. I mean, my mind was blown right then. I almost couldn't even speak. I have that in my video. I actually show the photographs of both sides of it. It's very clear. We have it in a frame now. And so that was almost like Brody making sure my son didn't think his mother was a nut telling him this information. We find this leaf.
That's
So
amazing to have real world physical manifestation of a sign you have like that, and especially if somebody that might not be as spiritual gets it, and then well, maybe I should pay more attention to this person. We need more of those, don't we?
I know. And I mean, to me, like just now I look down at my clock, it's 2:22, right when I'm thinking this. And I know you've mentioned this in some of your interviews and videos, a lot of numeric sequences pop up, the 222, the 1111, and that's been Brody's calling card to his family since way back, 1111. That's the day they were married, and his sister was born on 1212, interestingly enough.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So when I began writing Creation Song, I like I said, I kind of went into a meditation and was praying and asking for some information and guidance. And I was given the information that because every human, particularly the collective consciousness of humanity, has potent creative power. The 2,000-year-long belief that Christ would return in physical form at the end of the age assisted with the creation of this occurrence. But it was made clear to me that the prophesied second coming was not just about a Messiah returning in physical form. It was about the time of the return of Christ consciousness for all of humanity to receive during the upcoming event. the great shift. So then Creation Song came through and really blew my mind. So I'm on this ride. That's how I feel. I'm a nurse. I'm just a humble, Midwestern person from the 60s. And I know I'm living in an amazing time. And it's a great, great time to be alive.
Oh, I totally agree. So, what are some? Do you actually have any tips for those? Maybe that we can go over as far as energetic clearing and things like that. Things people can do on their own, or to seek out help from others, as it relates to that. Because for a lot of us, we're noobs. I mean, it's like we realize there's a lot more going on, but we don't even know the terminology for stuff. So, does that have to do with sort of the chakras and things like that?
At the core of it, at the energetic core of it, there's the energy centers. And really, it's about someone being still enough and calm enough to recognize not only their intuition, but where their thoughts are taking them, what emotions are actually being created by your thoughts. When you look at something, say you go out and you're looking at a person, what you're thinking about that person is actually informing that uh, energy of that person. So the best thing anyone can do is just be love, be loving, go out and rise above any kind of uh, old patterns, any programming from the mass media, from our culture, being judgmental and competitive. Instead realize the unity, realize the brother and sisterhood we all share, because we are one. We are one, and we are here to support one another, and be the caretakers of the earth. That's what we came here for. And if we can remember that, and every morning when you wake up, instead of bouncing out of bed and hurrying and being late, set it, 10 minutes early. Sit up and take some deep breaths and give yourself some affirmations. I'm clear, I'm at peace, I'm going to have a wonderful day. Just take 10 minutes and then do that again before bed if that's all you have time for. At least set aside a little bit of time to begin doing it, and then it will grow because you'll realize how good it feels. So just making small steps is a great way to start.
They're asking about. I thought I put the link below, but maybe I didn't. The video with John Holland, was that? I guess that's not the
It,
video that's linked. Where is that link? I found it
um,
somewhere. I just can't remember where now. Is it on your? Oh, it's actually on a playlist on your channel. Isn't that correct?
yeah,
Okay.
I've got a playlist. Yep, you've got that playlist on my channel, and it also includes, you've probably heard of the video I Pet Goat 2.
I Pet Goat too.
Have you ever seen that video? It was kind of a controversial thing. It was released in 2012.
I don't recall by the name. I possibly could have. I'm trying to see. Okay, so if you guys will click the link below, and then once you get to that video, because that's the one about the event, the Great Shift, and the Little Prince, which is sort of an overview of what we're sort of talking about now. But that will take you to her channel, and you can subscribe. But if you go to the playlist tab, you will find, or even if you go to the video tab, because you actually uploaded it, I see. Yeah, it says intro about John Holland. Isn't that the
Yeah,
video?
there's an intro just so people hear his spiel about his background, and the one with the little prince has the purple with the person kind of sitting there meditating
Right.
as
Okay.
the icon, where it
Okay.
says the Great Shift, the event, and the Little Prince.
Okay. Yeah. So if you go to her channel, there's 4 videos there, and you can either watch just the John Holland part or the fuller video that's got the John Holland part in it, if I'm understanding that right.
Yeah,
Okay.
what's kind of silly? I told you how low tech I am, Shane. I
Yeah.
actually only started using YouTube last year, and I thought it was just kind of for building my own playlists that I would listen to or some such thing. I knew that people uploaded videos, but I I hadn't really learned about much of that until just recently. So um, if my channel doesn't seem, I haven't tried for subscribers. I don't even know how to set about doing that really. but I wanted to at least get the information there, and I figured I'd later on come up with a way to maybe start talking about this. So I really appreciate being on your program, Shane.
Oh, no problem.
You're
It's been a
wonderful.
pleasure. And if I can help you at all when you want to start doing, just uploading videos or, well, actually, it looks like you got it all down. But if you want to live stream, I can show you how to do that too.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. One last point about the Goat 2 video. The reason I'm just mentioning that is because it's on the playlist for The Little Prince. And the reason it's on there, it was released in July of 2012 after 6 years of work, which began the same year that The Little Prince announced himself in 2006. And what's kind of interesting is the video creator, he related in an interview that he was driven to recreate the storyline in images that came to him in a vision, which he didn't fully understand. And he said that he felt humanity was heading toward a shift, a great change. And he was so compelled to create the video, he sold his house to help fund the project. And toward the end of the video, there's a scene with the resurrection of a young boy who arises in grand form, stopping the onslaught of a serpent. And this is immediately followed by the awakening of the Christ consciousness figure who'd been asleep as he traveled through the tunnel of darkness. And when that figure awakens, there are these purifying waves of light arriving from the sun to cleanse the earth. So I feel that he was kind of getting a download of the event. And when I saw this, I thought, wow, okay, so he shows two different Christ consciousness figures. One in the little boy, who they show initially on the lap of the mother, which looks like Mother Mary with a halo around her, and she's grieving over this little boy having passed away. But when that young boy arises in grand form, everything changes on the planet, and that's immediately followed by the Christ consciousness figure waking up as he travels out of the tunnel of darkness. I mean, it's kind of a cool video. Check it out if you haven't seen it.
Okay, I was just looking here. It's called I Pet Goat 2. It's an animated video, about 7 minutes long.
Yep, that's the one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're talking about here. Yeah, and it's sort of like he's all ablaze at the end as the sun's not like on fire, but on fire.
Yeah.
Like spiritually
Yeah,
on
it's
fire, not like
pretty.
burning up.
No, I found it unusual that he had two figures that represented Christ consciousness in correlation with the Little Prince. So,
That's
and
very interesting. I gotta watch that. I don't think I have seen this. So it was controversial because of.
well, it shows uh, it's called I Pet Goat 2 because if you remember when the Twin Tower attack happened, Bush was in Florida in a classroom, and these school children were being read a book in his presence, and he was sitting there being videotaped while these children were reading a book called The Pet Goat. And in The Pet Goat, there was some kind of phrasing that talked about, I don't know, don't quote me on this, but it was something like um, metal planes hit. I mean, it was almost like they were getting these kids to chant these particular words right when the attack happened.
I
So,
saw that. I didn't know about that at all. Like a week ago, I think it was Unirock did a video, and yeah, it was like must hit,
yeah,
still playing,
that's it.
and I
That's
think there
it.
was one
Must hit.
word
Yeah.
like butterfly that didn't really go with it, but the rest of them. I don't know. It was just odd. It was like, what the heck? And it was like you could see Bush sitting there, and because he had just
Mhm.
heard about it, and they're like chanting this stuff, and it had to be the synchronistic moment for him. Like, how do they know already, or why are they chanting these words? If it just depends what perspective he's from, if he had anything to do with it, or if he just had just heard about it or whatever. But at any rate, he was probably in his head, not paying attention anyway. But it's funny to hear those things now, and you're like, what the heck? What? That's a synchronicity if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, we can only speculate what some of the these synchronicities, how they took place. But anyway, I do believe that this little prince came here. I mean, 11 weeks literally to the day before 9/11. That's when the little prince was born, and he was born on the week of the, like I said, the total solar eclipse that occurred on the summer solstice, which is kind of cool on its own. So I feel like he came here at this time because his energy was pure. His energy was pure. And I understand that anyone who comes to the planet, we're all warriors. Every single human that's on this planet is a powerful warrior, or we wouldn't have shown up here, because the earth is one difficult school, if you will. So, anyone here is really kind of a blazing saddles warrior person. And if we can remember our mission while we're here, that's great. If not, our energy is still here. It still makes a difference to the mass consciousness, to the collective. I kind of picture this energetic circle around the earth, and it's a thick stream, and it makes up the totality of the mass consciousness of all of humanity through all of time. And we're adding to it. So everything we do is important. Every thought you have is important. So make the most of your time here. That's the best advice I can give anyone, and what I have told my children all these years. So, it's
You
nice.
said something. I can't remember if it was in one of the videos or in the book, because I read some. I cram so much in before a show that
I
sometimes I can't remember where
imagine.
it came from. But you mentioned something about like harnessing the power of the manifestation, but you mentioned as it related to selflessness, or having your intentions right for like loving others, and like along the lines of having better results when you're doing it out of love, or something along those lines, that I thought really resonated with me, because we manifest things all the time on accident, even bad things. But when we can use it in a selfless way, like say you're trying to heal someone else and you're not really getting anything out of it, but you're just doing it out of love because you hate, I think compassion is what you said, when you do it out of compassion. So if you're trying to help someone out of compassion, you can actually have better results with manifesting when you're tapping into that love or compassion. Maybe you can
Mhm.
clear up what I'm trying to say here.
No, you're right on. You're right on spot, Shane. When in 2006, it was the same year that the book The Secret was released. And I thought, wow, what a coincidence, the same information about the law of attraction, if you will. And my approach in All Flavors, because it's a story, I feel it's teaching the spiritual application of the law of attraction, which is based in compassion and love, because that's where the potency is. It's not
That's
about, I'm
right.
going to keep thinking of a Ferrari and I'm going to picture myself driving it. Maybe loving driving it. Okay, that might work. But the most potent thing you can do is come from a place of compassion, passion that's based in good intention. So,
So it's almost like you'll have better results if you see like a homeless guy and he doesn't have a place to stay, and you try to manifest, you like send good intentions or manifest a place for him to stay and to get out of the cold, and to have a home and a bed to lay his head on and all this. So you'll have better results with that than picturing yourself in a Ferrari, because you did it out of love and compassion rather than love for yourself and out of maybe just wanting things, possessions.
yes, well said. That's wonderful. Yeah, just being a loving person and having that compassion and really feeling it. And sometimes it takes practicing, because we live in such a culture. The competitive nature of our society is almost, I don't know, it's just so edgy to me. I've been somewhat reclusive a lot of my life, except when I work or go out with friends. And, you can almost feel it. It's like a palpable thing when you get in a big place. So, and you also can recognize other people who hold compassion. It's almost like your eyes will meet and you'll know each other. It's strong. That's the greatest force in the universe, is love. And when you're emanating that, you're going to draw that to you. And that's where the power is. That's where you can manifest, coming from that base.
That's cool. So I wanted to make a few connections, because there's people that came in a little bit late, and then we didn't really say it together, but there was sort of this connection with the Little Prince book that was published in 1946. And the way you were mentioning how he allowed himself to be bit by a snake and die young to carry out a bigger mission. And I love the parallel in that, because when you see like little Brody passing away at such a young age, to see that there was a mission behind and a purpose behind the whole thing. And then there's this direct connection that John Holland made between those two stories. It's really something I wanted to put together, frame it like that. For the people that's coming in later, they didn't hear you mention the whole Little Prince story in the beginning, but there was this parallel there and these synchronistic events that connected those two stories together. And he was leaving at the end of the first story and saying he'll come again to look to the stars. And then we have Brody that comes later, and then all the synchronicities that were surrounded with this date of his coming and all that stuff. So that's wild.
Yeah, yeah, and the harmonic concordance, the fact that that had only been seen, there'd never been the star in the heavens in a 4,000-year time span. So for that to happen exactly 1 day to the hour, I'm sorry, 1 year to the hour on the same day of his passing, that piqued my interest. And then I kept going down the rabbit hole, if you will. But to me, it was just a path that I felt I had to continue on. I was being led from one breadcrumb to the next. And the breadcrumbs got bigger until suddenly my son's holding a leaf with the same star on it on the day I tell him what I believed about Brody. It was on our doorstep at twilight.
I'm going to pull up the image with the star on it, with the person meditating, because I think that's the perfect image so people can get because that's the sort of the Merkaba we hear about. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this story. We definitely want to have you back, because I think there's more to this. And do you know when you'll actually have this last book finished up, like completely?
Well, yeah, I'm shooting for the end of summer. It's just got its own, I don't think it's going to be a very long book, but it's definitely got a lot of information in a condensed form. And again, it has kind of quantum physics woven into it. So there's a preview on my website, J. Barnes Author. Check it out, because there's even, when you read it, it almost helps you understand manifestation within just a couple pages. So, that might help people who have kind of a science propensity, that they want a little more what feels more valid. So that's what came through this creation song. And the other thing about, real quick, the last thing I want to mention, my first book in 1999, The Other Correlation from the Depths, that's a very long novel, and it gives a pretty huge background about my life. And that's a true story. I almost died in Phoenix at the same location that Brody passed away when I was 22. And Karen, the little prince's mother, actually saved my life. There was this kind of nutty guy, this evil man. He was a high priest in a cult, unbeknownst to me. And he was trying to, I guess, take my life or have me be, exit from society. So that's the other strange part that I was always trying to figure out. So that's in my first novel, From the Depths. Again, all these books are free. I just want to share the information for whatever it might do to help people at such a time. So I hope people enjoy it.
And I do have the images on the screen for people to check out, so you'll know what to look for. And the links are below. And the other thing is, make sure you check out the second light, because that's sort of, what did you say that goes over the actual event information you got? That's outside of the 3 books, right?
Yeah, that's outside of the 3 books. It's a separate website from my author website. That one's specific to the Little Prince, and that's secondlight.org with the number 2, Second Light. On there on the blog is The Great Shift, and that's what came through soon after All Flavors did. And that is about the event.
Oh, okay. That's what I need to go read. Then I guess I've missed that one. So it's not part of the trilogy. It just sort of came in between.
Yeah, it's just kind of its own separate little article / essay, if you will.
Awesome. So I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, check it out. And I'd love to come back on your show sometime. If you get some listeners who end up reading the book, I have a feeling they're going to have some questions, especially about From the Depths and All Flavors. And when I finish Creation Song, that would be fun to come back on too.
Definitely. Want to definitely have you back for that one when it's all released. And I want to remind everyone it's these books are free for this month, so make sure you go over and read them right away. This is Julie's gift to us, so we thank you so much for sharing these with us, and then we can get caught up. So maybe at the end of the month or beginning of next month, we can get together, and that way the people will be fresh in their mind after reading them, and then we can take some questions or something.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Do you mind if I read a really short verse that also came through? It's
No,
from
we
All
have plenty of
Flavors.
times. Please do. If you have to, go ahead. We have time, so it's no rush at all.
Okay. Okay, there's two little poems that actually came through at the tail end of All Flavors. It won't ruin the story, I promise, but I think they're pretty inspirational and they're short. So here's one. The light of compassion shines so steadily from within them that others could clearly see all the choices they were making, so they no longer were able to operate in the dark. Without a word, without a sword, the places that were void of light were unable to function on earth. This brilliant light, which emanated from each individual and became a collective force, stopped the planet's shifting. The seas became calm. The children stepped out to play, and a new song was heard everywhere. That's one. Um, the other one is very brief. If you don't mind me reading it, I'd love to just quickly read it.
Please do.
There's a rhythm throughout the universe. The pulsation throbs within every heart during each moment of ecstasy, in every birth contraction. The rhythm exists in the pull of the ocean tide, around the weight of each raindrop, woven into every cocoon. The sequence, the progression, is what we call time. Our time of influence affects the expansion of the universe. Heaven is eager to learn how we will add to the growth of eternal existence. God is ready to respond as you take part in creation. The rhythm never ends, it only strengthens and expands. This life force is you. You are the mystery. You are the journey. You are exquisite. You are here. Now it's your time.
That's
So,
beautiful, and I like the picture of the snow cone with the continents on it or whatever. That's cool.
yeah, that came to me pretty clearly. I like that too.
It's so.
Well, Shane, I appreciate all your effort toward spreading love in real time, like you say. I think your channel is wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to do it. It's like so fulfilling. Trust me.
Awesome. It's a lot of fun.
All right, you guys. Well, lots of love and light to all you all in the chat. Make sure you pick up the book, and thank you so much for coming on, Julie Barnes.
Thank you for having me, Shane. And thank you for all the listeners who are here.
Yeah, you guys check out the books, and if you have any questions, we'll have Julie back on at the end of the month, at the beginning of next month, when the books aren't free anymore. So make sure you don't waste time and you get right on that. And I guess we'll talk to you later, Julie. I appreciate you coming on. Lots of love to you, and I'll see you
Thank you,
on the
Shane.
next one.
Yeah, love to you all. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.